On the surface, the final game in Kingdome history, it should have been a real barn burner. Not only was this the curtain closer for one of sport's more iconic venues, but the matchup itself on paper seemed pretty good. On one side of the field, you had the upstart Seattle Seahawks, who were making their first playoff appearance in 11 seasons and their first home game in the playoffs for more than 14 years. Across from them were a pair of future Hall of Famers in Dan Marino and Jimmy Johnson. What more could you or anyone possibly ask for? Well, as you're about to find out, a lot. I'm Cheyenne Hollis, this is The Touchback, and today we are reliving the Seattle Seahawks' sad last stand in the Kingdome.
Playoff games are about stars. And when you talk about stars, you always got to talk about your quarterback, John Kitna.
It is the final game of Wild Card Weekend for the 1999 season, and Y2K has come and gone without issue. Just 24 hours previously, the world had witnessed one of the NFL's most shocking, surprising, wild, however you want to describe it, plays, the Music City Miracle. Do not expect that kind of excitement today here, folks. Anyway, the AFC West, and no, that is not a mistake, the AFC West champion Seattle Seahawks are hosting the Miami Dolphins on this Sunday matinee clash. So, how did we get here? For Seattle, it started in the offseason when they let go of Dennis Erickson and his never-ending spiral of mediocrity. They handed the keys to the franchise to former Green Bay Packers head coach Mike Holmgren. Not only did they hand him a huge contract, but they just gave him total control of basically the entire franchise, naming him head coach, general manager, and executive vice president. You cannot have more control as a football guy than that. His Seahawks raced out to an 8-2 start before losing 5 of their last 6 games in the regular season to finish with a 9-7 record. This was identical to their AFC West rival Kansas City Chiefs, but they got the playoff bid, the 3 seed, and the home playoff game due to a tiebreaker. By the way, this is another example of how broke the NFL playoff system was back then and is still broke to this day as far as the favoritism towards division champs. You see, the Seahawks and their 9-7 record, it was worse than both the Tennessee Titans, who finished 13-3 and got the 4 seed, and the Buffalo Bills, who finished 11-5 and we're stuck with the 5th seed. Those two teams, of course, played each other, while the Seahawks, who were 9-7, got to play the Dolphins, who were also 9-7. This is not a good system, but let's not get caught up on that. Instead, let's turn our attention to the Miami Dolphins, who did basically the same thing as the Seattle Seahawks in this year. 8-2 start, lost 5 of their last 6 games, and got into the playoffs because of having a tiebreaker over the Chiefs. Then, of course, you have the Kingdome, the game's real star, for being honest. It is slated to be demolished just a few months after this game happens. It will, of course, make way for work to start on Seahawks Stadium. In the meantime, the Seahawks will need to spend a few seasons at Husky Stadium before their new home is ready. It is a sellout, as you would expect, at the Kingdome. CBS is on the broadcast, and we have Greg Gumbel and Phil Simms bringing us this game. Tony Correnti is your head official, and Terry McCauley is your side judge for this game. All right, Greg, give America your best hard sell on why we should be excited for this matchup of 9-7 teams.
They both finished the season losing 5 of their last 6, both 9-7, and both had to rely on someone else losing on the final day of the regular season in order to make the postseason.
Oh, that is, well, it's something, I suppose. Game kicks off, Seahawks get the ball. They don't really do anything on the first 2 downs, and then we get a big 3rd down coming up. John Kitna connects with Joey Galloway, the team's star receiver, for a 22-yard catch. And that is all we will see of Galloway on the stat sheet for this day. He is targeted a few times, but the one thing to remember here is Galloway held out for like 8 games at the start of the year. He never really got into football shape and really spent most of the season as an afterthought in the Seahawks offense. Of course, he would be traded in the offseason. He was not long for Seattle, but yeah, kind of surprising that Joey Galloway has 1 catch and it comes within the first few minutes of the game. This drive would end when Jon Kitna almost throws an interception and the Seahawks are forced to punt. That is followed by a Miami 3-and-out. The Seahawks get the ball. On their second drive, the Seahawks find a bit more success committing to Ricky Watters, who, by the way, is not 100% heading into this game. Rushes a couple of times, has a catch, and eventually this drive would conclude with Jon Kitna throwing a touchdown pass to Sean Dawkins, and the Seahawks go up 7-0. Miami gets the ball back, and they slowly and methodically just sort of plod their way down the field. Eventually, they get the ball to Seattle's 15-yard line. They have a 4th-and-1, and then there's just a huge amount of indecision here. They can't really decide what they want to do. It seems like Marino wants to go for it. Jimmy Johnson doesn't want to go for it. Eventually, he wins out. Miami kicks the field goal, and we have a 7-3 game on our hands. The Seahawks get the ball back. Jon Kitna throws his second near interception on this day. The ball once again going off a Miami defender, and Seattle would punt. That is the end of the first quarter. Miami gets the ball back. They need 9 plays to go 32 yards and aren't in a particular hurry to get there, by the way. Eventually, this drive peters out with an ill-advised run on a 3rd and 6, and the Dolphins punt. After skinning a few cats already on this occasion, Jon Kitna finally throws that pick, this time just heaving the ball up to no one, and Brock Martin duly intercepts this pass with a pretty fancy snag, all things considered, using the one hand and getting a decent return in the process. Next possession for Miami, and here we see J.J. Johnson tackling himself on a screen pass that results in a loss. A few plays later, Jimmy Johnson somehow gets his hands on the game ball as another Miami drive sort of fizzles out after going nowhere, and the Dolphins punt again. Shoddy blocking sees Jon Kitna sacked, and Seattle returns the 3-and-out favor. Miami would get the ball back. They wouldn't have it for long, though, as they would then go 3-and-out themselves. Seattle in possession now, and Sam Madison would get called for a fairly soft-looking late hit out-of-bounds penalty. Man, people always say football was tougher back then, but I mean, judging by this, I don't know how accurate that statement is. The Seahawks eventually find their way to Dolphin territory on this drive. A 3rd-and-1 handoff to Ricky Watters can't pick up the first down, and Coach Mike Holmgren is stuck between two minds as far as going for it or kicking the field goal. Eventually, he does send his kicker out there, but then proceeds to ice him for some reason. That is certainly a bold move you do not see every day. Anyway, doesn't matter. Seahawks convert the field goal, and the score is 10-3. Miami gets the ball back, and Phil Simms really wants to try his hardest to convince you that regardless of Dan Marino's pretty sad-looking stats, that somehow the future Hall of Fame quarterback is having himself a good game.
Dan Marino, 5 of 9 for 28 yards, and you say, well, that is just terrible, but it really isn't.
Sure thing, Phil, whatever you say. By the way, Marino ends up taking a sack a few plays later anyway. With time winding down in the second half, Jimmy Johnson opts to run a play for no apparent reason to close out the half, a run that was totally not necessary, and we make it to halftime 10-3. By the way, this play, the absolute most pointless thing you could have possibly done. There was no upside here. It was a simple rush in between the tackles. Like, what was the best case scenario here? Like, maybe you get a first down that you don't need because the clock's running out. He could have taken a knee. They didn't have to run a play at all because the play clock was set to expire. I did not get this decision from Jimmy Johnson at all. During the halftime break, Phil Simms wants to convince us all that Jon Kitna, a man who has almost thrown 3 interceptions, is also somehow having a good game.
Jon Kitna, I think he's the difference. He's played well, made good decisions, and thrown the football down the field very well. So that's why Seattle's leading 10-3.
It's not a great start to the second half for Seattle, who promptly kicked the ball out of bounds on the opening kickoff. A few plays later, and the defense completely forgets to cover O.J. McDuffie on a fairly long gain for the Dolphins. Miami continues slowly plodding its way down the field for another drive. Eventually, they get down near the goal line. It's a 3rd-and-goal. Marino finds Arondé Gadsden on a slat, and we find ourselves with a tie game, 10-10. The following kickoff, and it looks like Seattle's about to have more special teams troubles after Charlie Rodgers bobbles the ball, but oh wait, he picks it up and scores a touchdown. My favorite moment here is when Charlie Rodgers gets close to the end zone and he starts taunting kicker Orlando Mari as he's about to score. Those are the good old NFL days. Anyway, Seahawks take a 17-10 lead. The next possession is not exactly one to remember for the Miami Dolphins. Marino throws a pass to no one in particular. Tony Martin then lets a pass just hit him in the hands, and we get another incompletion from Marino. Dolphins punt. Seattle's offense finally takes the field for the first time in the second half, and they go 3 and out. On the next series, Miami puts in running back Audrey Denson, who breaks off a pair of pretty solid runs, some of their biggest gains on the day. The Dolphins are not able to capitalize on this early success in the drive. It sputters out in Seattle territory. They kick a field goal, and we have a 17-13 game on our hands. For reasons I'm not quite sure, after the extra point, the Seattle PA announcer just decided that they were going to play jump for the entire break between extra point being concluded and the kickoff. And this apparently just caused everyone to zone out listening to jump, because Miami would come out, kick an onside kick, and recover it. By the way, this onside kick, not particularly well disguised. Like, if you look at the screen here, look at the formation, it's obvious what Miami is going to do based on where Orlando Mari is, and yet Seattle seems to have no idea that an onside kick could be coming. This does not end up hurting the Seahawks in any way, shape, or form, as they get a 3 and out and the ball back to end the third quarter. Speaking of that third quarter, the Seahawks ran a total of 4 plays for 1 yard, and you can already see their defense getting kind of gassed as that quarter progressed, and it does not bode well for their prospects in the fourth quarter. We start the final quarter with Patrick Surtain showing his son how to play corner, or not. Later on in the drive, John Kitna wildly misses a wide open Ricky Watters, and the Seattle crowd lets out a very audible groan.
Little flip out here intended for number.
Yet Phil Simms gives a really weird explanation as to what he thought had happened.
Did you hear the crowd? The crowd was going, ooh, because they saw the pressure coming from the backside.
Yeah, no, that is not what happened here, like, at all. I don't even know what Phil Simms is talking about. Anyway, drive ends with a Seattle punt. A big run from J.J. Johnson starts Miami's next drive. Dan Marino seems to forget what team he is on for this play. And in the next play, center Tim Ruddy tries to pump fake a snap, which is clearly a penalty. This drive ends with a Miami punt. The Seahawks would finally get their first down of the second half, thanks to a pretty amazing catch by Christian Foria. Then a Kitna sack halts any momentum and the Seahawks punt. We get a vintage Marino throw here on a 3rd and extra long that really bails the Miami Dolphins out. We now come to what I feel is probably the most interesting play in the entire game. Miami runs a flea flicker. Now, the first time I saw this, I didn't believe it was a flea flicker because it just looks so janky and awkward. But, I mean, maybe it was schemed up like this. I don't know why you would have J.J. Johnson run so far outside of the tackle box, but it turns out that would be a huge component of what happens next. So Marino got the ball back, throws it to no one in particular, and we think it's going to be intentional grounding. Oh wait, but it's not. The referees eventually get together, they discuss everything out, and they explained why a technicality means that this play is not intentional grounding.
The runner had left the pocket area with the ball. The ball came back into the pocket area. Although the ball was thrown into an area with no receiver, this is no foul. Second down.
A few moments later, Miami would get a free play, which would lead to a big gain for the Dolphins. Miami continues to work down the field, and eventually J.J. Johnson would punch it into the end zone to give Miami its first lead of the ball game late in the fourth quarter, 2017 to the Fins. Seattle's attempts at a comeback here are derailed almost immediately by a false start. That is then preceded by a John Kitna sack, another John Kitna sack, and we finish this drive out with a John Kitna sack. Seattle punts with 3 minutes to play and faint hopes of getting the ball back. We returned from break with Greg Gumbel promoting an exciting night of television on CBS. The cast of Nash Bridges hosting the People's Choice Awards. Can't miss TV there. Back on the field and with Seattle needing a stop, Mike Holmgren gives his defense a not-so-subtle message after using the team's final timeout. The 2-minute warning hits. Seattle does eventually stop the Dolphins from getting a first down, and the ball returns to them with a little over a minute left. This comeback bid does not exactly get off to the best start, and then a play later, John Kitna almost throws another interception. Hey, we finally see a John Kitna completion in the fourth quarter, and Seattle is still alive thanks to a key fourth down conversion. After doing his best to throw Miami the ball on several occasions previously, John Kitna finally gets intercepted, this time Terrell Buckley sort of coming out of nowhere to pick off this pass and ice the game. Miami trots onto the field for a kneel down, and that is your last play in Kingdome history. It was certainly a sad way to end the Seahawks' time in the Kingdome, considering they led for most of the game and could have won it with even the slightest bit of offensive competency in the second half. Running 4 plays in the third quarter, not doing anything with the ball in the fourth quarter. It was a really bad showing offensively. I mean, Miami, a good defense for sure, but they should have been able to at least move the ball somewhat in the second half of the game. The Kingdome, however, would not be the only thing to get demolished in the aftermath of this playoff matchup. A week later, the Dolphins would head to Jacksonville, where they were just absolutely throttled by the Jacksonville Jaguars 62-7. That, of course, ended up being both Marino and Jimmy Johnson's last game in the NFL. On the opposite sideline, well, Seattle would regress after this playoff appearance. They wouldn't make the postseason in the next 3 years, but Seahawks Stadium does open in 2002. At the end of that season, they fire Mike Holmgren as general manager, let him stay on as head coach, and the team really starts to turn things around in their new home. As for the Emerald City's dome, it is loved but not missed. If you've ever talked to people who were in Seattle during the Kingdome era, they have a lot of fond memories of it. They loved their time seeing games there, but it's not something they are wishful in returning to. Of course, it certainly helps that the Kingdome has been replaced by 2 of sports' great venues, Lumen Field and T-Mobile Park. There you have it, the sad last stand of the Seattle Seahawks in the Kingdome. Thank you for watching this video. If you would like to know more about when the Oakland Raiders played their last game at the Oakland Coliseum, only for it to not be their last game, well, check out the video in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. That does it for me. I'm Cheyenne Hollis. This is the Touchback. Hashtag take it out to the 25.